Hi everyone, welcome to the first webinar by Conway. Very happy to have you. It's a bit weird because I can't really see who's on the other side of the line, other than that a couple of people have joined already. Just some small notices. We have two moderators on standby as well, so feel free to use the chat in the bottom right. You can ask questions. They'll send those to me, and then I will add those to the I will add those to the questions later. So then I'll get back to that. Alrighty, I think we can start just looking at the, yeah. All right, I'll start the presentation. Cool. Well, today we're going to talk about mastering omnichannel. It's something that I've dealt with a lot in the past years when being at Ace & Tate, but also when serving our past 2 years with the clients that we've had so far. We have a lot of companies that on the one hand started in one channel and then tried to transition to other channels. And I think that's where this is really going to be really helpful to adopt some of the frameworks that I'll share, but also to share some insights and pains that we've went through. First, to start about Conway, want to do a quick introduction about who we are and what we do, just to provide some context, and then we'll dive into the content. For everyone who doesn't know, Conway is a boutique consultancy, so we specialize in digital commerce, as we call it. Our focus is in strategy, technology, and data. So our background is in technology. But what we've learned is that it's actually you need to look at it a holistic way, because just the right systems, the right technology is not going to help you. And another very important thing that we've learned is that basically a scalable company functions as a system. So technology serves as its backbone. However, you need to have this holistic view on actually enabling a company to scale. Myself, but also my partner, has been in those situations a couple of times. And the way we visualize that is basically this. So you go from chaos to calm. Every fast scaling company is quite chaotic, I would say. And where it really helps is basically to have a operating model, which basically is some sort of a framework to guide that chaos and to actually standardize and operationalize a lot of things that you do. It defines to some extent how you work as a company. And today we'll be talking about the strategic component in that. About ourselves, we've served as digital executives in a lot of omnichannel players. Most well known, I would say, is Ace & Tate and Suit Supply. But also in the past 2 years, we've worked a lot of new companies as well, which I'll share some cases on in a bit as well. This is me. My name is Jons. My business partner is Martin. He's a lot more technical than myself, but I think where our skill sets meet is in this, let's say, customer experience, or in software world we call that the product. So yeah, that's basically where our expertise is in. The promise that we often give, and I think that's the easiest way to explain it, is that we try to get consumer brands and retail companies fit for digital growth. Because what we've seen is that there's a lot of big business ambitions in growth and in scaling. However, if your company and your operating model is not fit for actually delivering on those ambitions, technology is a big component in that, then you're never going to achieve them. So that's basically what we help our clients with. And what we'll talk about a lot today is point number 2. So putting customers at the heart of what you do, and obviously also technology as an engine, but we won't go into depth for that today. Our clients are often investors from a technical due diligence standpoint, but mainly digital leaders and executives of fast-growing companies in consumer and retail. That's what we love the most and what we like to do as well. Just 3 examples. One is Pink Jelak, which is a nail polish brand from the Netherlands. They're also growing offline quite fast, and they really have that strong omnichannel strategy. Same goes for The Loft, which is an interior brand. They curate high quality premium well-made products, and they sell those primarily for their website, but they also have pop-ups across Amsterdam. Another great example is Lekker Bikes. They also started online, but also for a product like this, the offline world provides a lot of benefit in terms of service and expertise. So I think these are 3 prime examples of companies that really are nailing that omnichannel strategy, and we're lucky to help and support them in that. So enough advertisement and context. Today is more about the webinar itself. I'm going to try to explain how to not reinvent the wheel when executing on this strategy. What I've seen myself a lot is that there's a lot of talk about this buzzword, a lot of blog posts written, but nobody really explains you how to do it and how to show where the pain points are of it. Well, before we go into it, one step back about this this operating model. I think it's important to align on what the definition of a company is. And the things you see here underlined are basically the things that we feel are essential within a company. And in essence, a company is just a group of people that have a certain mission to achieve something. And all the other components, they help you to do that. And if you visualize that, you see something like this. So the operating model basically defines how a company works. So it's basically opening up the, like a car, it's opening up the hood and seeing how the company works. Another analogy could be like a blueprint for a building. Right, so company is basically a complex system of delivering value to its customers. Therefore, we are big advocates of being customer-centric or user-centric, because in the end, that's the person that's going to pay you money. So you better create an experience around that most important person. And what an operating model basically does, it breaks that system down into components, showing how those components work. And if you have a better understanding of that, then you can actually also influence the performance of the company and therefore deliver on these growth ambitions, for example. Today, the topic is about omnichannel, which fits in that first bucket. So on the strategy part, today we'll be talking about strategy. In upcoming webinars, we'll choose different components of the operating model to actually explain things, but today is all about strategy. All right, over to omnichannel itself. I think one of the key things that I've learned so far is that a lot of companies, they struggle with this continuously changing interface. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. It's basically the interface or the channel between you as a brand and the customer. Why now? Well, the internet is a magnificent thing. It has enabled a lot of consumer retail brands to sell direct to consumer and basically own the end-to-end experience. And I'll try to explain that a bit further down as well. However, this explosion of new sales channels has made selling things fairly complex, especially if you try to combine the online and offline world. And what we aim to do with this webinar, but also with the work that we do from consultancy, is to provide some sort of a framework to not reinvent the wheel and hopefully simplify things as well. So what do we mean by digital commerce or e-commerce? That's always sort of the terminology that's getting mixed a bit. I think the main thing is that you try to sell things in a seamless online and offline world, either physical or digital things. Talk about the online world, obviously you have web, you have apps, you have social, especially something like social is also turning from a marketing channel into a sales channel. And in the offline world, you have things like retail, wholesale, pop-ups. And if you want to be successful as a modern consumer brand, you need to be able to play in all these different channels. And that's exactly where the complexity comes from. So I always think it's good to try, when you're trying to look towards your future, is to understand where you came from. So bit of a brief history lesson here. One important part is exactly as I already mentioned, just when going into this. One of the key challenges that we see is that people or companies, they struggle with this continuously changing channel or interface. And the only thing I can tell you is that we'll continue to change, right? The only constant is change in that sense, especially in the digital world. And it's even ramping up in terms of speed. So I think that's one of the key challenges you have to deal with as a consumer brand or retail company. And if you look back at the offline world, so the ages of retail, it goes a bit slower than the online world. And if you look at the top left image here, the black and white one, there's actually quite a nice shopping experience, if you ask me. You walk into the store and the staff is behind the counter and all the inventory is behind the counter as well. And they're actually there to serve you. They're there to help you. Very specialized. It's an in-person experience. Then I think somewhere around the 80s and the 90s and maybe even the 2000s, you got this big box retailer experience. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it, but it's basically for me, it feels like walking through a warehouse, right? It's basically go get it yourself. And it's all stacked in big boxes. And yeah, as I said, it feels like walking through a warehouse, if you ask me. Very functional way. And maybe it's efficient because they have a massive collection. But yeah, I don't know. It feels a bit outdated and it depends on what you're trying to sell. Then the third picture is by Marisa Lamaris, which is one of our clients as well. And I think companies like that, but also the three ones I just showed you, like Lekker Bikes, Pink Jelak, and The Loft, they excel in basically utilizing the data from the online world, but then also providing that into a personalized human experience offline. So for example, when you would walk into a store, they can see your wish list, they can see your purchase history. So they can actually craft the offline experience fed into the things that you got from the online one to a better experience. If you then look at the online world, as you already can see, and we have brackets of 10 years or decades here, goes a bit faster. And actually we're just getting started to some extent. So the old people here, they probably recognize that the PC looked something like this image here. So you had this big machine and a big monitor on your desk. So the device was a personal computer, and the channel there on that device was the web browser. So that was the early 2000s. A PC on every desktop was the mission of Mr. Gates from Microsoft. Well, I think he was quite successful in that. However, the rest of the ecosystem was not there yet. So I think that's one of the reasons that the first .com bubble burst. There was just not a big enough install base. There was no broadband internet yet, but there was already massive investment in terms of companies selling online and e-commerce becoming a thing. However, let's say the market was not ready yet. Then you enter the decade of Mr. Jobs. So Apple, obviously, with the iPhone. If you carry around your iPhone, then basically home is where my phone is, right? So if you have that smartphone with you, you tap it a couple of times, and food shows up at your door. A taxi shows up at your door, right? So the device changed from a personal computer to a smartphone, enabled with broadband internet. The channel also changed, right? So the web browser is still there, desktop browser, mobile browser, but also an app ecosystem, social, obviously, like all these new channels started popping up. And now I feel that we're moving towards this new era where sort of the mantra is AI is a new UI. So artificial intelligence is the new user interface. And the device, to some extent, is becoming screenless, which could be a bit weird because it's not a piece of glass that you're looking at or tapping anymore. In the case of a voice-controlled interface, you basically have a speaker that doesn't have a screen, but you can communicate and interact with. So the interface changed from a piece of glass to something in voice. And now obviously VR with Apple, with the spatial VR as well, I could also see that turning into something new. And I'll try to explain also later what that does to your technology stack. But my main message here is that you need to be ready for this continuous change, right? So your technology stack needs to be agile and adaptable, flexible, modular, things like that, that can actually adapt to all these constantly changing channels. Well, why I personally believe that this omnichannel strategy is the way forward. Reason number one would say, and I think that's just a thing to be aware of, is that the modern consumer has a very high standard in terms of digital experience, and that standard is not established by you or your competitors directly. That's basically established by companies like Uber or like Coolblue here in the Netherlands or like Amazon, because those companies, they heavily invest in digital and technology, and that is basically the new, let's say, standard for your consumer. So if you don't follow that, if you don't cater to all these different channels and craft this experience, you're going to be left behind. So a great book about this topic is called The Experience Economy. It's been here for quite a while, but I think we released it again a couple of like 2-3 years ago, and it really beautifully describes how a product, like a physical product, goes from a commodity to a good, and then layer on more services and an experience that it eventually turns into experience. One of the best examples of this is Disney, for example, right? So they craft this experience where it's almost impossible not to buy something, right? So they have physical goods, as in toys, for example. They provide services, as in content. And then if you want to go to one of their theme parks, well, it's basically all mixed into three. And this book really explains how to transition these phases for you as a brand, as a company. So I strongly recommend reading it. Second reason I would say is that the online and the offline world, they both bring unique benefits. And it's not that one will win over the other. They're both there. And my message would be to just craft or create your experience in a way that you utilize these unique benefits in the best way. It's maybe a bit of an obvious example, but the example I would like to give here is Apple. Apple is obviously a massive retailer. Yes, they sell technology stuff, but I think what is most remarkable about them is that it's not so much about the technology itself, right? So when they sell an iPod, they're not telling you how much gigabytes it has, but how much songs it stores. And I would say the same is true for their experience. So they really figured out a way to blend this online and offline world by elevating the benefits per channel. So if I just read this out loud, the reason that Apple stores look as they do is that they're not designed to solely drive transactions, as in sell things. They're designed to do everything that can't be done online, such as build relationships, offer service, solve problems, and upsell. So when you walk into an Apple store, there's actually someone there at the Genius Bar who's very knowledgeable about the product, and they can help you in basically in any different type of way. And if you then look at their online experience, for example, what is very good online? Search, right? So searching products, comparing products, consuming content around these products. So I think that's just as an example of a great experience that I wanted to highlight. And today I'll try to explain what the framework behind that is. So what are the things that you can do for yourself as a consumer brand to get to that level to get that level. And I would say Apple, or another obvious example is Nike. You know, that's a bit ambitious, but I think it is something that's always been inspiring to myself. So if this section, it was all about the trend, so in the historical perspective, what happened with channels, what happened with the online and offline world. But if you make that specific for digital commerce, what has actually been happening there? Well, you can look at that sort of 4 high-level phases. So if you would answer, how do we get where we currently are? And that's also companies that we often work with as well, is that there are still quite a lot of companies that are, let's say, started in the retail world with a single offline channel, and they're still struggling to figure this, not so much even an omnichannel world, but to figure out how to add a website to their current retail stores. It's almost unbelievable, but yes, there are still a lot of those companies out there. And I think the second step would be there is that, and I would say single offline was everything up until the 2000s I just showed you. The single online channel is when new online channels started popping up with the PC and with the mobile phone. So people started selling things via the web. They started selling things via the app, but they felt as very disconnected experiences, right? So you had your retail store, you had the web, but they were not from an operating model perspective, not from a customer experience perspective. They were fairly disconnected. Then what you saw happening, I would say 10 to 5 years ago, is that it turned into a multi-channel world. But this was still very logistical driven. So you saw things like buying in store, having it delivered at home, buying online, having it picking up in store, like all these cross journeys and things like that. They sound simple, but if you do that with a store network of around 70 companies, well, that turns into something very complex. And you need technology and software to support all these different business processes. So that's why there are still a lot of companies that are struggling with this multi-channel approach, right? And also sometimes due to their business model. Some companies, they have a wholesale strategy. Some companies, they have a retail partners or department stores, for example. And then how do you cater to that customer? Because it's not your customer, right? So you don't have access to the inventory of that specific store, for example. So it's just an example of where all this complexity arises. Then if you talk about the fourth phase, this omnichannel world, I think one of the insights I had there is it really helps to have one view of the customer. So, and what I mean by that is that you have one centralized customer ID or customer profile, which is often accessed by your My Account on the web page, right? I think that's one of the easiest ways to relate to. However, when I, as a customer, I interact with you as a brand, I want you as a company to have access to that customer profile or that data from every channel. As in the example I just gave about Maurice de la Mars, is that when you walk into a store, it would be great if there's someone there with an iPad that can actually say, hey, Jons, I see that you like these colors. I see that you had this on your wish list. This is now on discount, for example, right? So things like that. I think these channels will continue to pop up. They want to come, they're going to go. However, the goal that you have as a brand is this master data, is this data that you have around your customer, their purchase history, all the things that, let's say, surround the customer profile. So I think that's one of the central pieces of an omnichannel experience. To dive a bit further into the problem that this omnichannel world is going to give you as a brand is that the digital age, consumers constantly switch between these channels. Remember that visual I just showed you with the 4 phases. When you just have a single offline channel, it's quite simple and overseeable. You just broadcast a message on TV, for example, and you send everybody to your local shopping street. Fairly simple and straightforward, right? And that is still a world that a lot of retailers, they long for, right? So they're like, oh, I wish it was as simple as back then. The problem is that, and we do a lot of customer research here at Conway, is that we basically see the reality is something different. So the customer journey is broken up into several micro moments, as we call them. And if you look at the visual like this, it's also called like a swim lane overview, right? So it might maybe a bit small, but I'll share the slides later. What you see here is that on the social channel, someone gets activated in an Instagram post. Then, for example, they visit your website to try something in augmented reality. Then they use the product as a try-on, for example, at home. Then go back to social to share a photo of them wearing that T-shirt, send it to their friends. Then they go back to your website to browse a bit further. From there, they may maybe chat with your CX team as well. From there, they might walk into a store. They get some style advice there. Then they go back to a video chat with your CX team, right? So I think you're getting my point. It's constantly switching and hopping between these different channels, and I think that's the complexity and the struggle that a lot of companies have with omnichannel, is that you can't really capture that customer in one channel or in one behavioral pattern, I would say. The only thing that's marked red here with the small bag of money that you see here is that's always the thing that a lot of companies focus on, right? Because they feel that the channel where people pay is the one that's most important. Well, maybe to you as a company, but not for your customer. Your customer doesn't really care about where they click pay. If they, in this example you see here, they clicked pay on the web, but it could have just been that they would have paid within your store, or maybe paid within Instagram when browsing your social media account. So our message here is basically well, it's not that you put the customer is in control, and they constantly switch between the channels, and it's your job to basically cater and craft an experience in which they get that freedom and flexibility. So the solution for this is not to build the experience around, the solution is to build the experience around the customer and not around the channel of purchase. So not to focus on where that they actually click pay. And if you visualize that, you get something like this, right? And that's often where I see a lot of our clients struggle with, because they don't have this one view of the customer, right? So these sales channels are all disconnected. They live in different systems. They just have a different organizational structure. So there's a retail boss and a web boss, and they don't really like each other because the one is stealing revenue from the other. Well, again, that's not how the customer looks at it, right? They don't really care about your internal structure and your internal Christmas bonuses. So your customer gets completely frustrated because the data points, these customer profiles, they're not connected. The way to do it is to do it in an omnichannel way, is to basically craft that experience around your customer. And I'll provide you with some tangible frameworks to actually do that. But first, I wanted to share an example. Since I don't have any interaction now, I can't really see the questions, but this is often a quiz question, and I'll give the answer now myself. This is a large German optician company, and the main thing that is missing here on this page, which is quite weird if you ask me, there's no prices. There's no add to cart, there's no checkout button. It does have this red marker you see on top there, and it basically says, find a store near you. So what it's trying to do, it's trying to force you to go to a store. Why is that, right? So maybe I'm already ready to buy a pair of glasses, but yeah, the company is trying to steer me towards something, and it's not putting me as a customer in control. And to explain that, I would like to revert back to this operating model I shared earlier. It's basically that the operating model, so how the company works, is not designed for an omnichannel world. It's been designed for a franchise model, because many of these companies, and a franchise model means that there's other companies running a Fielmann branded store, for example. And the problem there is that the prices differ per store. So therefore they can't, or they will not, they don't want to show the price of that specific frame on the site. Because if you visit a store in Berlin or if you visit a store in Munich, you have something different. Same for data, right? So the performance metrics, therefore, are not aligned around customer centricity, because they are aligned around the internal structure of franchisees, right? So that's not customer centric. Same goes for the technology part, right? So probably, I don't know, I haven't seen the company from the inside, but I'm assuming that the software systems are also disconnected. There's not one view of the customer. There's not one centralized profile where all this customer data is being tracked. And then therefore the last part is also about the people, right? So probably, and again, I don't know the company from the inside, but probably their responsibilities and their roles are not set around the customer journey. They're set around a specific channel. As I already said, you probably have a web boss and a retail boss and a franchise boss, and they don't really like each other. At least they're not acting in the best interest of this seamless customer journey. Well, a company or an example of where we at Azentate also try to do this a bit different. If you would take this example as a product detail page for one of the products, is that you see this big yellow button that says add to cart. Obviously, that is, in terms of online conversion, the most important one. However, there's also two smaller buttons down there. One says find a store and the other says book an eye test. These are different journeys, but if you craft a omni-channel experience or a good customer experience, maybe that is the phase or the micro moment that customer at that stage is in. They're not ready to buy yet. They're not ready to add to cart yet. So my goal has always been to help people make purchase decisions, and that you have hard conversions like adding to cart and buying something, but there's also soft conversions, right? So like booking an eye test, for example. So and that still creates a data point. It creates trust with the customer, and it's in the best interest of the customer to visit a store, because in the store there are very well-trained staff, right? So same as the Apple example, I don't think it's so important where customers click pay. It's about creating all these different micro moments to provide the best customer journey or the best experience. And if you then sort of summarize that, as already mentioned in the beginning, the channel between you and the consumer will continuously change, and it's your goal as a leader of the company to craft a strategy that can deal with that, combined with a technology stack that can deal with that. However, the success of the omnichannel experience lies in the interplay of transactional and experiential. And what I mean by that, it's basically the characteristics of your product or your brand. Some brands are more positioned as value products, so they're very transactional, and often there customers will choose the path of the least resistance, right? So sometimes that is visiting a store because it's around the corner, or you're already passing by the store on your way to work on the train station, for example. Or if the product suits it and your buying behavior suits it, you will go for option B, which is more experiential, which brings you the most value, right? So I think those are high level two directions, and it's not for any type of brand, it's not like either or, right? So even very experiential brand, you need to have your transactional things in order, like making it easy to pay, making it easy to ship, right? So obviously there's transactional components to a experiential brand as well, but you need to balance it out. And to make that a bit more specific, and again, I'll share these slides later as well, you as a brand need to decide where do you want to play, right? Do you want to be perceived as more transactional, like a supermarket, like Action here in the Netherlands, for example? It's fairly low priced. It's sometimes quite impulsive things that you buy, and it's somewhat considered as a commodity purchase, right? So, and therefore the buying frequency is also quite high probably, right? So you might even visit that weekly or daily even, like supermarket, right? So where you would buy things on a daily basis. And often customers are a bit lower in brand value and they're very price driven. And that also results into your marketing. So if you look at where to market for these types of products or these types of positioned brands, it's often very much in the Google ecosystem, because people have already decided that they want to buy something. So it's more about, they already decided that they want to buy. They're just trying to figure out how, where basically. So it's more about demand capture. On the experiential side, it's a more considered purchase. So luxury brands like Gucci, for example, on an extreme case, right? So something like Apple or Nike might be, I don't know, somewhere in the middle. They probably have a bit of both. The buying frequency is lower, but like the good thing is that there's probably more margin, so there's a higher price. The customers are often a lot more brand loyal and they have more affinity with a specific brand. You know, if you're buying a trash can, for example, you don't really care that much about the brand, you just want it fast and cheap, basically, right? So that is very much on the transactional side of things. All right, I hope I gave that a bit more context to the whole omnichannel strategy. And then to dive into how to, right? I think that's one of the most important takeaways of this webinar as well. It's not just about the theory and about the strategy, it's also how to do it. So I think the first step is, in moving your strategy into action, is to define and look at your value proposition. And the value proposition is just a fancy word for the products and services that you sell or that your customers want. A pattern that we've spotted is the 3C flywheel, which I'll show you in a bit. And what that helps you to do is when you're selling direct to consumer, it enables you to own the end-to-end experience and create some sort of a flywheel. And what that means is that it basically one activity feeds into the other. So what we've seen there from analysis is that customers often come for the commerce and the content. And I'll explain with some examples in a bit, but they stay around for the community. And as I already said earlier, I think one of the key goals of a digital leader within a consumer brand is to help your customers make purchase decisions. And that's a subtle difference from selling something, right? I don't want to be sold to, but me as a customer, I do want you as a brand to help me make a purchase decision by giving me good content, for example, or giving me reviews and things like that. Subtle difference, but a very important one. And what we've labeled this let's say this pattern, the 3C flywheel of commerce, content, and community. So again, commerce is what you sell, the products and services which help you to make money. Then you have content to stay top of mind and to educate your consumer on your specific category, for example. And if you do that well, your customer base basically grows into a community, right? So it sometimes turns into a conversation around the campfire almost. And I'll make that a bit more specific with 3 examples. And as I already said earlier, this brand or the customer ID, the customer data profile is sort of central in this whole strategy, right? So, as an example, Rafa is a direct-to-consumer brand. They have a really interesting strategy in where they sell the things you see here on the picture, right? So glasses, helmets, jerseys, things like that. Everything you need for fast-speed cycling. And what they started doing is publishing stories, as you see here as well. So they have a blog for every city that they're active in. You can find really nice stories about their customers, but also to see where to ride, basically, right? So interesting content around where to use their product. That story segment actually first started on Strava, the app for cycling and for exercise, but they now also have their own app, right? And within that app, they basically build their community, and their stores are not really stores. They're actually meeting points. So the people that buy the Rafa product, they want to be affiliated with it. They go to the store to meet other people and to go on a ride together. So they've really built a beautiful way of selling more product because you consume their content, you're active in their community, and when you show up at one of those community events, yeah, you're gonna wear the same Rafa jersey. So that enables you to buy more, right? So I think it's a great example of where you bring these 3 things together. Another example is Lululemon. They sell a lot of yoga apparel. They started off with that at least, but they expanded a lot in other products as well. And from there, they acquired a startup called Mirror, and that Mirror is basically an interactive mirror in which you can exercise. Well, same trick, right? So they publish content with a subscription on that mirror, and what happens? You buy more Lululemon apparel. So it turns into a flywheel of the content, keeping you keeping top of mind, providing services, maybe even subscriptions there, and then building a community out of that. Final one is the other way around. So this is a very interesting example of called Glossier. They started, what you see here in the bottom left, a blog called Into the Gloss, which had a very active community. So the readers of that blog, they really enjoyed the content, and they actually challenged the founder to say, hey, you have a big opinion around all these different makeup products and brands. Why don't you start your own? So it basically went from community into content and then into commerce. And now they basically have a very active, very vocal community still around their products. Well, as I said, we study this sort of pattern of the 3 C's for a lot of companies. Soon we'll be launching something called the Brand Radar. So we'll share our analysis on these different brands. So yeah, please do sign up for the newsletter on our site to keep you posted on this. And what I'll also do is I'll share this canvas basically in which you can fill in your own value proposition, right? So you start with the jobs to be done, then you define the pains and the gains that you solve as a product or as a brand. Then you actually define the products that you sell. In this case, for example, nail polish, some services around it. So booking a style advice in a store, for example. Then create more content around beautiful nail art that you can create, and that in the end turns into a community. So to summarize around value proposition, the first principle would be one view of the customer, right? So to have one centralized customer database profile around the interactions that a customer has across all these different channels. So next step after the value proposition is how do you actually define an omnichannel experience? Well, back to the value proposition, products and services, right? The commerce part, then that value proposition needs to be sold via a certain experience, right? Spread across the different channels. And I think a very important thing there, and what I'll show you is that we've identified 23 different sales channels at this moment, is to select the channels that are most relevant for your specific target audience, right? So I don't know if you're selling things, the elderly people probably don't start using TikTok commerce heavily, right? So that channel is not aligned with your target audience. But this is just a structure to how do you say, to review and to define potentially more digital growth opportunities. So I think the main thing here is to leverage humans where it matters, basically, right? So in the purely online world, yes, especially investors, they see that as the most scalable one because it's self-service, right? So you sell things via mobile, desktop. There's basically no human interaction needed. You just click a few, you tap a few things on your phone, and stuff shows up at your doorstep. The remote one, I think, is a very interesting one, especially due to COVID as well. Then it's a bit more human influence, but it's still remote, right? So you would basically book a style advice via a video video conferencing like that we're doing now, for example. And then obviously on the other side of the continuum, you have full human service, so stores, malls, wholesale, things like that. And if you then break that down into the 23 I just mentioned, and again, I'll share these slides later, you have a really interesting way of figuring out, hey, this channel fits our brand, this fits our product catalog, yes or no, right? And then based on that, you can basically decide, here I want to be active and here I don't want to be active. So I think the principle number 2 here for the omnichannel is you need to be where the attention is. So where is the attention of your target audience? Which channel fit best to that attention span? And again, it's constantly changing, so it's not a fixed thing. So then the final step, and I think this hopefully is gonna create the most value because it's a worksheet that I'll share later as well, is basically how then do you select the channels for that omnichannel experience? How do you decide where to invest your time and money, basically? Same visual, right? We've defined the value proposition. We've selected some channels in the omnichannel experience. And what often helps is that you break up that omnichannel experience into specific journeys. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit. It's not that there's just one customer journey. There's multiple smaller journeys within that journey as well. And then you map those across the channels. So for example, when purchasing a bike, for example, you want to try the product, right? So you want to ride it first before you buy. You have the browsing the catalog is also a specific part of the journey. And then you might also want to return it to get serviced, basically. And then with channels, we mean the things we already discussed, right? So web, retail, chat. And what you then do is basically you try to define your channel mix. So if the channel is constantly changing, the problem there is that not every channel, existing or new one, they have the same level of experience, right? So, and I'll show you in a table what I mean by that. So it's very important to create an integrated mix of channels, right? So, and I think that integration is key. I think that's the way forward, and that's what really will win. And as I already mentioned, not every channel will bring the same level of quality. So if you have that experience and you selected your channels, they basically say, okay, what are the specific journeys within my experience? Like trying, browsing, checkout, when can I pay something? For example, a service like booking an advice. Or getting order updates, returning a product. If you do that, for example, for the web, well, trying a product on the web, you can do something with augmented reality, for example, but it's never going to be as good as retail, right? So trying a product in retail, you just have the full collection. So browsing a collection is also a lot easier. There's just a rack with all the clothes or jackets or whatever that are there. So, again, going back to my earlier point, elevate the benefits per channel. Just create an experience where the specific journeys are the best in a certain channel, and don't start forcing people in a specific channel because you make more money there or whatever. No, it's more about providing that best experience. Then you can map this across more channels, right? So from chat, from voice, from VR, Obviously, VR, I wouldn't start investing in that now, but it is something that has a lot of potential further down the line if the install base gets there, right? So if there's enough people, just like with a phone, there's a massive install base now, so it makes sense to invest in things that happen on a mobile phone. But I think you're getting the point, right? So this is basically a methodology to refine and decide where to put your investment in terms of time and money. So the final principle around this channel mix, as I already said, elevate the benefits per channel, right? So create this experience and focus your attention and on the parts in the journey in which the channel is best. That brings me to the conclusion. Yeah, I think the most important part is omnichannel is almost the same as becoming customer-centric, right? So hopefully what I was able to explain to you is the fact that you need to how do you say, align the customer over the channel, and be able to deal with this constant change of these different channels. You need to have a healthy digital backbone. And what we mean by that is basically that operating model. It's not just about the software or the technology. It's also having clearly defined processes, having clearly defined roles and responsibilities for your team. And then also, obviously, the technology stack, right? Because if you don't have an API layer, for example, to communicate with all these different sales channels, you're never going to have the rails to provide that customer journey and to some extent provide the infrastructure for your growth ambitions. Next slide I'll skip through. That's more for to read later, but this is just I would just want to repeat the principles I've shared. So around value proposition, one view of the customer, omnichannel experience, be where the attention is. So select the channels that are most relevant. And then when analyzing your journey, define how to elevate the benefits per channel and to really make that in service of your customer. That was it. I'll wait around for a bit if there's any specific questions. Otherwise, feel free to send me an email as well. We're going to do these webinars hopefully every month, maybe a bit further extended, but the idea would be to bring on share this knowledge, and then these videos are also recorded, so if you want to share them later with someone in your company, that's no problem either. These are just 3 examples where we can help with, right? So on the one hand, the future omnichannel experience, but also how to build that technology stack to empower all the things I shared today, but then also to align your metrics model, and also to provide a hierarchy, right? So the CEO looks at different things than a marketing specialist, for example. So I think those things also need to be aligned. Cool. That was it. Let me see how this is going. See if I see some questions here as well. No, nothing specific. So I want to thank you a lot. And as I mentioned, we'll share over email these worksheets, so you can try to use it yourself as well, and also the video. And my email address is jons@conway.expert. So also feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or send me an email. All right. See you next time.